All right, let's dive in. Today we're going deep into the oil and gas world. But, and here's the twist, we're focusing on a side you don't always see, the back office.
The back office, yeah. It's not the oil rigs or pipelines that usually grab the headlines, is it?
Exactly. And we're tackling this with EAG Business Holdings.
We often associate oil and gas with massive infrastructure, the engineering marvels. But the truth is, a lot of a company's success hinges on what happens behind the scenes. That often invisible back office magic.
Totally. And nobody, and I mean nobody, wants to wade through spreadsheets and drown in paperwork.
It's the oil and gas nightmare.
They claim to be revolutionizing those behind-the-scenes processes that can make or break a company in this industry. But before we get into their solutions, let's set the scene, paint the picture for our listeners. When you think oil and gas, what's the first image that pops into your head?
Besides maybe a gushing oil well.
Besides that.
Honestly, it's got to be complexity. And nowhere is that more evident than in their back office operations.
Right. The industry is practically synonymous with complex back office processes.
Absolutely. And those complexities, they come with real consequences. We're talking about a world where, let's say, inaccurate volumetric calculations. Well, that can mean the difference between a profitable quarter and completely missing your targets.
Oof, that's a big swing.
It is. And that's just one example. A tiny error in lease records, something that seems minor, it can snowball into major legal battles down the line.
And we haven't even touched on the regulatory landscape.
Don't even get me started. It's constantly evolving. And keeping up with it all is, well, let's just say it's not for the faint of heart.
Sounds like a recipe for some serious sleepless nights, endless coffee, and maybe even a few premature gray hairs.
You got that right.
No wonder EAG is laser-focused on this part of the industry. There's clearly a huge need for what they're offering, these, efficiency solutions, right?
That's their bread and butter.
And they're very specific about it, too. They describe themselves as a privately held consulting and outsourcing firm that's completely immersed in the oil and gas world. They're not just any outsourcing firm, they're specialists, which is interesting.
It is, and their specialization, it's not just about knowing the industry jargon, it runs way deeper than that. I mean, they've reportedly worked on over 500 projects.
Wow, 500.
Over 500. And they claim expertise in over 70 different software packages specifically designed for this field.
Okay, now that's impressive. That level of granular knowledge is something most generic outsourcing firms wouldn't even know where to begin with.
Exactly. They're not just dipping their toes in the oil patch here. They are swimming in data and experience.
Okay, so we've established they're experts. But what does that actually look like on the ground, in the real world? What do they actually do?
Well, their main thing, at the heart of their business, is back office outsourcing. That's where EAG really shines.
Back office outsourcing, got it. So they're taking over all those essential but often tedious tasks that keep an oil and gas company running smoothly.
Exactly. And they've strategically divided their expertise into 3 core areas to tackle the most common pain points: land administration, volumetric accounting, and general accounting outsourcing. They handle it all.
Okay, let's break down those 3 areas, starting with land administration outsourcing. Now, I have to admit, when I hear land administration, my mind goes straight to those dusky old deeds locked away in filing cabinets overflowing with paper. How does EAG go about modernizing something like that?
Well, imagine this. Instead of relying on manual tracking and physical copies, they help companies transition to digital platforms. Think of it, all those lease records, division orders, crucial documents, all easily accessible, searchable, and always up to date.
So it's like taking that mountain of paperwork, all those dusty deeds, and transforming them into a sleek, easily searchable digital database.
Exactly. It's a total game changer,
Yeah.
especially when you think about just how many land agreements are involved in oil and gas operations.
Oh, for sure. Thousands probably, right?
Thousands, try tens of thousands, sometimes even more.
Yeah.
And the benefits go way beyond just, decluttering the office.
Yeah.
EAG actually highlights this really interesting case study in their materials about a company that was really struggling with disputed royalty payments. Yeah, a real mess, and it all stemmed from inaccurate land records. They were facing lawsuits left and right, and we're talking potentially millions of dollars in losses.
Because of something as seemingly simple as inaccurate records.
That's the thing about the back office. Those little inefficiencies can have massive consequences.
Talk about a ripple effect.
Tell me about it. But anyway, EAG stepped in, helped them digitize and organize their entire land administration system. And you know what? They were able to resolve those disputes, saving them a ton of money in potential legal fees and lost revenue.
Okay, so it's not just about organization for organization's sake. It's about mitigating risk and protecting the bottom line.
Yeah, you're getting it. And that brings us nicely to their next area of expertise, volumetric accounting outsourcing.
Volumetric accounting, huh? That one sounds a bit more, I don't know, technical.
It is a bit jargony, I'll admit, but trust me, it's incredibly important. Basically, it's all about making sure companies are accurately tracking the oil and gas they're producing, transporting, selling, the whole shebang.
So kind of like making sure your inventory records match your sales, but for oil and gas and on a much larger scale.
Exactly. And just like with inventory management, accuracy is absolutely crucial. If you've got inaccurate volumetric calculations, well, that can throw off everything.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, for starters, you might end up misallocating resources, sending drilling equipment to the wrong site, or even worse, misreporting your financial data to investors.
And in the world of oil and gas, those inaccuracies could be incredibly costly, especially with how volatile prices can be.
You hit the nail on the head, and that's where EAG comes in, bringing their data-driven approach to this really complex part of the business.
Data-driven, huh? So is that all about fancy algorithms and software or what?
It's definitely tech-enabled, that's for sure. They help companies integrate their systems, improve the accuracy of their data, and implement these really cool real-time monitoring tools.
So instead of relying on outdated spreadsheets or whatever they were using before, they've got a live dashboard showing them exactly what's happening in their operations.
It's like having a finger on the pulse of their entire operation, 24/7.
That's got to be valuable. But do they also provide the, I don't know, human expertise to actually make sense of all that data?
Oh, absolutely. They emphasize having a team of really experienced volumetric analysts who not only manage the data, but can also provide insights and recommendations, help companies actually optimize their operations.
So they're not just data crunchers, they're strategic advisors.
Exactly. Remember that case study we talked about earlier? The one with a company losing millions because of those inaccurate land records? Well, EAG says their volumetric accounting services have helped other companies reduce errors by up to 90%.
90%.
Seriously, that's what they claim. And that leads to more accurate forecasting, smarter resource allocation, and way smoother audits.
Okay, now those are some tangible results. It really highlights how these behind-the-scenes improvements can make a real difference to a company's financial health.
It's all connected. And speaking of connected, that brings us to the final piece of their back-office outsourcing puzzle, general accounting outsourcing.
Okay, this one feels a bit more familiar, invoices, payments, financial reports, that sort of thing. But I'm guessing the oil and gas industry adds a whole other layer of complexity to it all, right?
You're telling me. We're talking about things like joint interest billing, which basically means you've got multiple parties who all have ownership stakes in a well or a pipeline, and you've got to divide the costs and revenues fairly among them.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a nightmare, especially if you're still relying on manual processes.
It can be. And then there's regulatory reporting, which, let's just say, the oil and gas industry isn't exactly known for its simple regulations.
It's probably always changing too, right?
Constantly. And the penalties for non-compliance can be massive, so you really can't afford to mess it up.
So it's not just about balancing the books here, it's about navigating this whole web of regulations and stakeholder interests.
Welcome to the world of oil and gas accounting. But that's why companies turn to experts like EAG.
Right, so how do they approach this side of the business?
They've got a two-pronged approach. First, they bring their deep, and I mean deep, understanding of oil and gas accounting practices. They make sure everything's done by the book, no exceptions.
So they're the regulatory whisperers, making sure everything is squeaky clean.
Exactly. But here's the second part, and this is key. They leverage technology to automate a lot of those repetitive, time-consuming tasks that bog down accounting teams.
So instead of having your team drowning in invoices and regulatory filings, EAG swoops in with their digital tools and expertise and streamlines the whole process.
Precisely. And here's what's really interesting. They don't just swoop in, take over, and leave you to fend for yourself. They really emphasize collaboration and knowledge transfer.
What do you mean by that?
Well, they work really closely with their clients' existing teams, not just to handle those day-to-day tasks, but also to identify areas for improvement and give them the tools and knowledge to keep those improvements going, even after the project is over.
So it's not just a quick fix, it's about building a more efficient and resilient operation for the long haul.
Now you're getting it.
Yeah.
And that focus on collaboration, on those long-term solutions, that's something you don't always see from outsourcing firms.
No, you're right. It's usually a more transactional relationship, isn't it?
Exactly. But with EAG, they seem to be genuinely invested in their clients' success, which is refreshing.
It is, but it's also important to remember that back office outsourcing, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, right?
Yeah.
Some companies might need help with all three of these areas: land administration, volumetric accounting, general accounting, while others might just need support in one specific area.
You're absolutely right. And that's where EAG's other major service offering comes into play: team augmentation.
Ah, yes, their on-demand talent pool. Right. We touched on this a bit earlier, but tell me more about how that works.
So imagine this. You need a specific skill set for a project, maybe a really specialized software or a particular type of analysis, but you don't necessarily need someone on staff full-time.
Okay, that makes sense, especially in a field like oil and gas where things can change so quickly.
Exactly. And that's where team augmentation comes in.
It does, it really does, especially like you said, in an industry like oil and gas where things can change so rapidly.
Right. So instead of having to go through the whole hiring process, maybe even relocating someone, which takes time and costs a lot of money.
Right, right.
EAG, they're like, we've got you covered. They have this whole network of experienced professionals, people with really specific skill sets, and they can place them with your company on a project basis.
So it's like having access to this like on-demand dream team of oil and gas experts ready to tackle whatever challenge you throw at them.
Exactly. It's all about agility, right? Adapting to the ebb and flow of the market without being bogged down by all those long-term commitments.
Makes sense. Now, we've talked a lot about what EAG does, all these different services, how they approach things, but let's zoom out for a second, connect the dots for our listeners. Why does all of this matter? What's the big picture takeaway here?
At the end of the day, it boils down to this. EAG is in the business of helping oil and gas companies work smarter, not harder.
I like that.
It's all about efficiency. By taking on all those essential but maybe not so glamorous back office tasks, streamlining those processes, providing that specialized expertise, well, they free up their clients to focus on the things that really move the needle.
The stuff that actually brings in the oil and gas.
Exactly. Let EAG handle the nuts and bolts so you can focus on the big picture finding and producing oil and gas, developing new technologies, navigating all the complexities of the global energy market.
It's like they're saying, leave the details to us. You go conquer the world.
Something like that. And, this focus on efficiency, it's not just good for business. It actually has some interesting ripple effects. Remember earlier we touched on the potential environmental benefits?
Oh, right. It's not just about profits. There's a sustainability angle, too.
Exactly. By reducing paper waste, improving data accuracy, optimizing resource allocation, well, they can actually help their clients shrink their environmental footprint, which is huge in this day and age.
Huge. Okay, so it's good for the bottom line and potentially good for the planet, too. Anything else? What about the people?
Oh, right. We can't forget about the human element. Imagine a world where those oil and gas professionals, they're not bogged down by all that tedious administrative work. They actually have the time and the mental energy to focus on solving problems, to really innovate.
It's like they're removing all those little stressors, those little drains on their time and energy.
Exactly. And that leads to a more engaged workforce, more productivity, and happier employees.
Who doesn't want a happier workforce, right? But it begs the question, and this is a big one, especially in an industry that's under so much pressure to evolve, to innovate. Could partnering with a company like EAG be the secret sauce? Could it be what unlocks the next generation of oil and gas technologies?
Now that is a thought-provoking question. And it's one that I think oil and gas leaders really need to be asking themselves. By outsourcing those back office functions, could they free up the resources to invest in more R&D, to really push the boundaries of what's possible?
Right. Instead of being stuck in the weeds of spreadsheets and invoices, they can finally focus on the big breakthroughs: carbon capture, advanced drilling techniques, maybe even totally new forms of energy.
Exactly. The possibilities are really exciting to think about.
It's like they're clearing the runway for innovation to take off. We'll handle the day-to-day. You go reach for the stars.
I like that. I like that a lot. And in a world that's grappling with climate change, with an ever-increasing demand for energy, well, those stars have never felt closer.
So there you have it, our deep dive into EAG Business Holdings, a company that's quietly but significantly changing the game in the oil and gas industry, starting with the back office and radiating outwards. We've covered a lot of ground here, from spreadsheets to sustainability, administrative burdens to breakthrough innovations, and now it's our listeners' turn. What do you think? Could optimizing your back office operations be the key to unlocking your company's full potential in this rapidly changing energy landscape? That's something to think about. Until next time.